Good evening and welcome to our annual Diversity Grand Rounds. It's good to see all these bright minds and beautiful faces out here today. Thank you for joining us. Really quick, I wanted to say a special thank you to all of our applicants, our residency applicants that are here. Thank you. A lot of them have come from far and near, and I hope that you gain a lot from our evenings. I remember sitting in your seats last year, and then this night being the night where I really felt like I found my tribe, where I felt like people at Children's National cared about promoting diversity and inclusion, not only here at home, but nationally, and being national leaders in promoting diversity and improving minority health. And since I've been here, I've been pleasantly surprised that this permeates not only the people here on the front line, on the floors every day, but also goes all the way to the top, as evidenced by our first speaker, who is the president and CEO of Children's National. He's a surgeon, a recognized leader in pediatric health. Since becoming CEO in 2011, he has fostered a culture of patient-centered care and championed innovations in research, operations, and clinical care. He has forged partnerships with other health systems in the region, with government and community entities, and with industries in local, national, and global level. He is also a strong advocate for expanding mental health for kids and has led 2 national forums on this issue. In 2017, his memoir, Healing Children, A Surgeon's Stories from the Frontiers of Pediatric Medicine, debuted as an Amazon bestseller in pediatrics and earned national attention and critical praise in the New York Times Book Review, the Washington Post, and the Harvard Review. On January 1st, he will become the chair of the board of the Children's Hospital Association. And CHA represents the interests of children on a hospital, state, and federal level. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Kurt Newman.
Well, thank you, Diolu. I've got a pet peeve, and that's like. All right. Well, my pet peeve, love for all of you to come forward. If you're family here, really embarrassed to see right now. Come to the video participant will be out there. Foot half in, half out. Dr. Little leads through. Like the Bible, yeah. You and I trained together. Well, then I didn't want to give her a hug. Well, that was a terrific introduction, and thank you for that. I said, when you have an intern, or do we call you a first-year resident now? Whatever. Okay. I just don't want to get in trouble. But that can speak so eloquently. I don't know if that was fake news all you put together there, but it sounded good. And I think I'm going to ask you to introduce me wherever I go. But it's wonderful having you all here at Children's National today. I see, a lot of our leaders here. And, you all are probably looking at a lot of different programs, and because you're excellent and you have so many options and opportunities, and we're, thankfully, and I appreciate that we're one of them, your interest here. Our leadership being here, this is, I hope you'll feel when you leave here that it's authentic. This isn't about trying to put on a good show and pull the wool over your eyes on what goes on here. I hope you'll kick the tires hard. You'll meet some of our people, and you'll be talking to our residents. And I think that's what we want you to do. And make sure that what you hear is actually real. And I think you get that from your peers. I've been at Children's National now 34 years. I came here after a residency to do what was a 2-year fellowship. I never left. And what struck me when I walked in to Children's National, maybe like you, maybe you had this experience, maybe not, but I felt like I was at home. I felt like, and I'd been, at some pretty big name places, Duke, Boston, Harvard, Brigham. But what I felt here was the connection to the community, that the hospital had a role and a place in the community. It had big aspirations around specialty care and research, education, innovation, and all of that. And we are delivering on that. You'll hear about that, all the things that we're doing and the accolades. But at the same time, there was this passion around about caring for the kids and families in our community, which, in 2 years, we'll be celebrating our 150th birthday. So we're one of the oldest children's hospitals, and we never wavered from that commitment to our community. It's in our strategic plan. It is, and you'll see and hear a lot about it. We're proud of our community health track, putting about, where's Denise? Right there. Dr. Core Brown will probably tell you about it, but putting $70 million of capital into some new clinics in parts of the city where there's not enough doctors. And, you'll hear about a lot of the things that happen out there. And I see some of our great alums here, Dr. Ballard, who I work with very closely. And he'll be speaking, I think. And we've got, we're getting accolades for our teaching, and people like Dr. Stems. We were just got a big teaching award, or the community health track got the teaching award from the American Pediatric Association, which was big. Our leaders, I see Terry there, who's now, you're an associate dean at George Washington, and still at Children's. And you'll be hearing that, because that's a big part of what we do. But at the same time, if you're interested in specialty care, we've got that is going great guns. I just saw an email, Dewesh, our residents that went into specialty care, 75% of them got their first choice in fellowships. And these were, I don't know if these hospitals are any good. CHOP and Texas Children's. Not that I'm competitive, but and a lot of them are staying here too. Right? I appreciate your mentioning the working with the other health systems, and one of our, and I see a lot of Howard students here. One of the most important relationships we have is with Howard University and the School of Medicine, whether it's clinically or with around education, the pediatric clerkships, and many other things. Part of it goes to Dr. Wayne Frederick, who's now the president of Howard University, as a surgeon like me, and he trained here. he rotated here, and he's a good friend. And he and I and Dean Mighty, who's the dean of the medical school, are working together to even build on that relationship. You can go all through these different accolades and things about, and I'm sure somebody's going to tell you about the U.S. News and World Report. If they don't, I'll tell you that we were ranked 5th this year. Not that that means anything, but our neonatal unit was ranked number 1, and for 2 years in a row. And we had one of the special privileges, I think, of being in Washington is that we are the Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. So if you're interested in advocacy or having an impact on what goes on here, whether it's the government or a lot of the different things that are happening, this is the place to do it. And a lot of our folks have gone on to do that. And there's just so many different ways that's played out. I see Dr. Allison Jackson here, one of my good friends, who has one of the first endowed professorships, second one, for child protection. That's something a lot of places don't pay any attention to, and we double down on it and have an endowed chair. We have some of our advocacy team here. See Dr. Dooley over there. Are you speaking? Or are you just sitting up front? Because that's what I said. Are those your kids? Wow, okay. They're starting early. Are they applying for internships? Oh, they're doing their homework. Okay. Yeah, it's a competitive environment in Washington. People start their kids early down the road. And Dr. I just made you an honorary. Dr. Tanya Kinlow, would you stand up, head of our government and community affairs? Dr. Kathy Farrar, since you're late, could you just sit up here, Kathy? Who runs about everything that has to do with HIV, plus she's a terrific softball player on our softball. But where was I? Oh, I have to leave. I wish I could stay with you for the reception, but the mayor has got something going, and we need to get down there to make sure Children's National is not overlooked. So I just have a lot of things I want to tell you, but I'm going to give back the time for a lot of people that are, more engaged in the day-to-day operations of what goes on here. But I want you to know how much I care and appreciate that you would take a hard look at us. I think being in the nation's capital, we have an important responsibility. And one of those responsibilities make sure that we're creating a pipeline for underrepresented minorities. We want to lead in that, and we want to train the leaders that care about that. We've been making a lot of progress, and it would just be a special privilege for you all to come and teach us some of the things we need to learn. So, have a good evening. My email you can get. If you want to talk about something, I'm happy to do that. I met one of the folks that was looking at things last year at this event, and now he's actually helped me with my TED Talk last week, and I don't see him. What's he doing? He's where? What? You mean you just don't do that all? I'm old school. I'm a surgeon. I get it. No, but that's fantastic. But we have fun here too, and I hope you get that feeling too. It's a great group, and I love working with the residents and the chief residents. So have a good evening. Thank you for being here. I have written a book. Thank you for the shout out. I'm happy. If you want a copy of it, we can find a way, or you could order it. It is doing real well. If you like it, let me know. If you don't come here. And it is just got translated into Spanish. I'm really excited about that. So getting that word out. Anyway, have a good evening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Newman. I'm not getting paid to say this, and my fiance will corroborate, but we went on vacation to Mexico, and I actually read his book on the beach. It's a great book, and yeah. I'm not getting paid to say that either. No, that was great, and it's one of the things I love about here at Children's National is that everybody is accessible, and when he says email him, he really means it, and he responds. So we're going to follow up on that momentum with another great speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Denise Bramble. She's our Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President of Ambulatory and Community Health Systems at Children's National. She's a professor of pediatrics at George Washington School of Medicine. She's a diplomate of the American Board of Pediatrics. She is the recipient of the highest national honor in community pediatric education, the Academic Pediatrics Association and the AAP's National Pediatric Community Teaching Award. In 2016, she was recognized by the Washington Business Journal with the Women Who Mean Business Award. She was also featured in the book. Against All Odds, Celebrating Black Women in Medicine, as one of the 100 most prominent historical and contemporary Black women in medicine in the United States. So in summary, she is a boss. Dr. Denise Bramble.
I think the title that I'm most proud of is that I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 2. So if you would ask me at the end of the day, that's really what's most important. So it is a pleasure. I don't think I've ever seen this auditorium look like this. To have so many people of color sitting in this auditorium, all filled this way. This is great. I want to welcome you to Children's. I want to give you a warm, warm welcome and want to share with you some of the things that we're doing here at Children's so that you get a good idea as you consider those that are applicants, as you consider your options. I have to scratch beneath the surface and go beyond the websites and listen to what really is happening in each of the places that you're considering. I am actually privileged to be here at Children's as the Chief Medical Officer. I have been here for 16 years. I was recruited as a Senior Vice President, and then in 2013, I was promoted to be a Chief Medical Officer. I share that role with my colleague, Dr. Wessel, who is the CMO for hospital-based specialties. And between the two of us, we lead all the docs here at Children's. So that's my day job. I want to tell you about some of what we do, and specifically as it relates to the work around inclusion and diversity. Over the last years, there's been a great focus and emphasis on this specifically. And we at Children's really understand that in order to deal with some of the complex issues in the community and with our patients, you need to have the sort of a diversity of perspective. You have to have people from different backgrounds to really look at it and to be able to solve these issues as it relates to disparities and equity of care. So I want you to know that from our perspective, we understand that that's critical. But the commitment to diversity really begins at the top. And I mean that sincerely. And I don't take for granted the fact that we have a CEO who really lives it. I wish I could claim credit and say that I influenced him and he's the way he is because of me, but that's not the case. He came wired that way to the job. And he is committed to diversity here at Children's National and has demonstrated it. I remember one particular time when we had commissioned the Association of American Medical Colleges to do an internal assessment as it related to inclusion and diversity here at Children's, and then to develop a 3-year strategic plan in terms of what we were going to do. And that particular year, the budget was a little, kind of tight. And I remember asking him, like, Kurt, do you still want to do this? And he said, and I remember he said, this is really important. in spite of what we're dealing with in terms of the budget, we are going to do this, and we're going to do it this year. So he has really demonstrated in many, many ways, that's just one sort of his commitment as it relates to diversity. The other thing that he did was something unique in that the study that he commissioned was the first of its kind here at Children's. The strategic plan as it related to inclusion of diversity also, to my knowledge, was first of its kind. And then we've gone about trying to implement some of the strategies in the strategic plan. One of them involved appointing a chief diversity officer, and he appointed me in that role. And we also have an associate chief diversity officer, and it's Wandy Johnson, and she's on maternity leave. So to give really focus to those specific areas, he appointed us. I want to tell you about some of our early work. What have we done so far so that you can get an idea of the kinds of things we're doing here at Children's. And this is not a solo job. It really requires a lot of collaboration with some of the other leaders that you see here in the auditorium. We've chartered and we've convened the Diversity Council. It is a group of individuals that does include trainees, where we look at some of these issues and we look at implementing the strategic plan. We did something that some institutions don't care to do, and that is that we did a salary analysis, an equity analysis. We wanted to make sure that our faculty were being paid fairly. And in terms of gender and in terms of ethnicity, we did the hard work. Now, the challenge with that is once you start looking at it, then you have to correct it. It's not like you can do it and then say, okay, we're good. No. In areas where we weren't good, we made the change so that there would be equity. I will tell you that there are not many institutions that dare to do that kind of work, and I'm proud to say that here at Children's we do that. We launched a website that focuses specifically on diversity and inclusion to catalog some of the programs, some of the work that we do here at Children's. One of the things that we did this year is that we completed what is called the Health Equality Index Survey. And that is to really, it's the national tool to see how well you're doing in caring for LGBTQ communities and the staff, not just the patients, but the staff. And I was I led that effort, and it was really quite exhaustive in terms of what was asked, and then the documentation that needed to be submitted. The next step is then to look at our scores. We're still waiting, and then to really try and address some of those issues so that we are an institution that define diversity very broadly, that we care for and value equity as it relates to not just race and ethnicity, but sexual orientation. The other thing, that I'm really proud of, that I've joined with other leaders here at Children's to really try and recruit and retain minority trainees and minority faculty members. And I'm assured by Dr. Teach, the chair of pediatrics, that last year 30% of our interns were underrepresented minorities. That is not, ladies and gentlemen, chump change. And it is more than the national average by twice the national average. So it's a big deal, the way that I see it. What's on the horizon? One of the things that we did and looked in assessing for faculty members, where we wanted to look at what the barriers were to promotion. And one of the barriers that was stated was the lack of mentorship. So I'm going to work with others to launch what I'm going to call a mentorship lattice project. Lattice in that what we plan to do is to have either individual or group mentors or peer mentors for underrepresented minority faculty and trainees. And it is not just that they will have mentors, but they will also mentor someone. So envision sort of the metaphor of a lattice where you have people that you will mentor and then you will be mentored by someone else. So it's going to take some time to launch it, but that will be an important project to make sure that everybody has the mentorship that they need. I'm also working with Stephen Teach. One of the things we wanted to do was to look at the underrepresented minorities that have been in a particular in rank as it relates to if they've been assistant professors for more than 7 years or associate professors, what's keeping them from going to the next level. And he's working with others to analyze the data. And then once we have the data, the goal is to work with those individuals and to have specific interventions to get them out of sort of whatever it is that's keeping them. We want them to move on to the next level as it relates to academic advances. And the last thing is that we're assessing our leadership pipeline. When we look at succession planning, we want to make sure that we have leaders in the pipeline that can take on sort of the role of leaders in the future, and that those leaders are diverse. And I'm working with HR. They're launching a Rising Leaders program, and I'm nominating individuals that are underrepresented minorities to be a part of that program. I will tell you that when I was I'm going to end with this. When I was a Howard medical student back in 1976, 1980, I did an elective here at Children, and I felt like I was invisible. And I will tell you that I'm gratified to see the programs that have been launched, where we are today, and I'm really privileged to be a part of what I consider a journey. I don't ever feel as though we're there, but it's a journey towards having an environment that is inclusive, where there's equity, where we embrace people from all ethnicities and all races. So with that, I will pass it on to the next.
Nice. Thank you for that. I will say, as large as this program is, I felt anything but invisible. Like, I know, like, I feel here that I interact with people every day who know my name, from all levels of leadership, and really care and are invested in me. And I know that's in large part thanks to the efforts that you started. So we will jump right into our next speaker, who is pretty much our brain trust in this hospital. His name is Dr. Mark Badshah. He's the Executive Vice President. He's the Chief Academic Officer and Physician-in-Chief at Children's National, and also serves as the Director of the Children's Research Institute. Dr. Badshah also holds a professorship in the Fight for Children professorship in the Department of Pediatrics at GW. He has spent his entire life caring for children with developmental disabilities. He has published more than 200 articles and reviews, and is senior editor of the classic textbook Children with Disabilities, now entering its 8th edition. Dr. Badshah's research has focused on inborn errors of urea synthesis, in which he is considered an international authority and has been continuously funded as an NIH principal investigator for over 40 years. He is who I want to be when I grow up. Welcome.
Thanks very much. I wanted to say a few words using personal vignettes about diversity, disparity, and equity. The first vignette, if you go up to the 5th floor of our hospital, you'll be in the atrium for the Research Institute. And we have this map of the world there. And each one of the pins that you can see here represents one of the faculty or staff, the country that they came from. The one up in Canada is me. I come from Montreal. And over 60 countries are represented. And when we think about research, we think about team science, and we think about how the backgrounds of all these individuals from all these different places come together to answer questions to improve child health. If I drew a map like this for what was happening in the clinical programs, you'd see the same type of thing. I think that's one of the unique things about us, the diversity that we have here, and how we all work together to be a team, an effective one. The second vignette is about that book that you mentioned, Children with Disabilities. It's now going into its 8th edition. And in this edition, I asked my esteemed colleague, Dr. Cora Bramble, if she would get a team together to write an article on racial and ethnic disparities and how they affect the care of children with developmental disabilities. And she brought this team together, led by Dr. Pelusi, and including my daughter, Alyssa, who is a special ed teacher, and really brought forward the following points in the summary of the chapter. And although this is about children with developmental disabilities, it really is something that we can think about with all children in terms of pediatric care and things we need to be thinking about. One, that the families face challenges in accessing health care and education, and that even greater difficulties are reported by racial and ethnic minorities than those in the general population. And we need to be aware of that and need to do something about that. And that these disparities are multifactorial, but it's increasingly clear that we can really contribute to either raising or reducing these barriers. And we have to make sure that what we're doing is reducing them. That thirdly, that a step towards reducing these disparities is our self-assessment of bias. And lastly, that organizational training and the diversity of teams are components of institutional change, because it's quite clear, all of the research shows that children who are cared for by individuals of their same racial, ethnic background do the best. And so our commitment to training a diverse community of practitioners is one of the most important things that we do. The third vignette is about my dad. My dad was a social worker. He died 2 years ago at the ripe age of 101. And in 1974, in Montreal, he was called by the premier of Quebec to look at the juvenile justice system. I'm telling you the story because it's lead into what we're going to be talking about next. And in his obituary in the Montreal Gazette, they noted that there was the Montreal Gazette, which is a major newspaper, Anglophile newspaper in Montreal, detailed the maltreatment of children who were in this system. And my father was asked to go in and look, and he found that there were major problems, and he ended up leading a large group that published an 11-volume tract on the juvenile justice system and how it should be moved towards rehabilitation and education, and became the foundation of what is now done in the United States and Canada, but not everywhere and not to all children. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I will introduce our next three speakers. I'll introduce them in block, but they stand as giants on their own. The people that we've heard before, I always enjoy listening to them, and I run into them all the time in the hospital. But these next three people, we don't get to hear from as much at Children's National, so I'm especially excited for this talk. The first of them is Dr. Alexandra Sims. She's a general academic pediatrics fellow here at Children's National. She started her medical career at GW, where her interests in patient advocacy and underserved populations were supplemented in the community and urban health track. While at GW, Dr. Sims served as chapter president of GW's SNMA and worked on the regional executive board thereafter. She completed her pediatrics residency and served as chief resident here. And in 2018, Dr. Sims was recognized by George Mason University as top 50 exemplar alumnus. Her academic interests are in health services and health equity. Joining us also is Dr. Al Billard, who currently serves as the medical director of the DC Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. He also serves as physician surveyor for the National Commission on Correctional Health Care. Previously, he worked at Children's National Medical Center as division chief of oral health and medical director of the Southeast Health Center. Dr. Billard's interest in fiscal management of healthcare systems led him to earn an MBA from Johns Hopkins. During his 5-year tenure at DYRS, he managed to stabilize the health services department by recruiting and retaining a team of full-time medical and behavioral health staff. Additionally, he led the agency's efforts at achieving NCCHC accreditation in 2017. He is an active member of the American College of Correctional Physicians, and he is fully committed to the organization's goal of improving public health by examining issues specific to the incarcerated, as evidenced by this talk. We also have the pleasure of having Dr. Danielle Dooley and her children here with us. Dr. Dooley is the Medical Director of Community Affairs and Population Health in the Child Health Advocacy Institute, or CHI, at Children's National, and an Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at GW. Her interests include school health, juvenile justice, healthcare for children and families who have immigrated, and teenage pregnancy prevention. Prior to joining Children's National, she worked in a federally qualified health center, Unity Healthcare, for a decade. At Unity, she was the medical director of adolescent health services and 5 school-based health centers. She was elected to the national office in the AAP in October 2017 as a member of the National Nominating Committee, which identifies and selects candidates for national leadership in the AAP. So keep me advised. Please welcome our speakers. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I know we're keeping you from dinner, so we'll go ahead and get started. We don't have any financial disclosures for our talk today. We did want to kind of start with a disclaimer that today's topic does kind of involve some discussion about the legal system, and we're not lawyers. That may not be a surprise. But we really want you to think about, as we kind of show you the objectives, think about juvenile justice involvement from a public health lens, and really think about these kids as a vulnerable population. We hope that by the end, you'll be able to at least loosely describe the spectrum of justice involvement for youth, explain the role of the pediatrician in this system, and identify educational and advocacy opportunities here at Children's National, particularly for our special guests, the applicants. We hope by the end you start to see some advantages of training here. So we're going to start with a case. Imagine you're in primary care clinic. You're seeing a 14-year-old male with his grandma in clinic. He's on the urgent care schedule. He's just there to get some sutures from his knee removed. You maybe, just because you're curious, ask him about what happened to his knee, and he shares with you that he and some friends stole a car, got into a car accident. He spent 3 days at the local secure residential facility before going to court. He was placed on home monitoring with an ankle bracelet, obviously injured his knee as a part of that car accident, and was placed on probation, and that his best friend was killed in the car accident. You probe further and ask more about how things have been going with him. Grandma shares that he failed the 8th grade and he's repeating it now. The grandmother's his legal guardian. You notice in the chart that he missed his 12 and 13-year-old well child checks, but has been seen sporadically for random sick visits, colds, and whatnot. And on his physical exam, his vital signs normal. Outside of a well-healed laceration, his exam's fine, and you do notice that he has on an ankle brace. So this is a kid I saw in clinic probably a year or so ago at the Anacostia Clinic here in D.C., and I was the urgent care provider that day, and just kind of at the end of this visit felt like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do here? Where do I even start? If you were seeing this patient in your clinical environment, what additional questions would you ask? What kind of things would you be thinking? Like, how does this make you feel? I'll just call on the people I know if no one follows. Yeah. Sure, right, yeah. I was wondering the same thing. This might have even been his great-grandmother, if I think about it, because I think she was probably in her 80s and had no help, felt super overwhelmed. On the, spectrum, he was probably pre-contemplative for change or whatever could be before pre-contemplative. He was kind of like, yeah, whatever. What else? What else would you be thinking? What would you want to do for him? Kristen? Yeah, I was wondering all the same thing. Anything else? Maybe one more person?
Probably round up.
Sure. Maybe get grandma out of the room, ask your full head assessment. Great. Perfect. So in addition to all the things that you guys mentioned, the things I was wondering at the end of this visit were, what were this kid's most immediate needs? What are my resources? What can I tap into? And what's going to happen to him after today? So we hope that by the end of today's presentation, we'll at least be able to answer some of these questions for you, or at least get your wheels turning. So to give you a sense of where we are with the juvenile justice system, we're using the term justice-involved youth to talk about kids that are kind of all across the spectrum of involvement in the juvenile justice system. Dr. Ballard's going to define some of these a little bit more, but talking about kids that are on probation, kids that are detained, kids that are committed. And some synonyms that you'll hear used if you read some of the literature around this are youth that are system-involved or adjudicated youth. To put this in context for you a little bit, the U.S. incarcerates more people than any other nation, and over 6 million people are considered to be involved in our criminal justice system. This figure is number of people under 18 that are in custody per 100,000 of the population, and you can see the U.S. far outnumbers even the next closest of South Africa and New Zealand. The numbers with adults look similar, if not more disparate, when you compare the U.S. to other countries. And so, though the number of juvenile arrests are downtrending from year to year, in 2016 there were over 800,000. I think a couple years before that there were just over 1 million. So the numbers are downtrending. However, Black youth continue to be overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. Nearly 30% of these kids are girls, 35% are Black. 40% of them are getting in trouble for offenses that are considered nonviolent and non-serious, things like truancy, or what we call status offenses, which we'll get into in a little bit. And 80% are reincarcerated as adults. So this is, to some degree, a revolving door. When you think about the lifetime risk of imprisonment, this really varies as you consider people's different identities that they bring to the table. So as I flip through the next figures, I want you to think about the different patients that you see, maybe the people in your own life, and kind of how some of these figures sit with you. And so when I think about the kids I see in clinic, this is scary, right? Like when I think about the kids I saw earlier today, these numbers and these estimates really scare me when I think about kids' health and trajectory. So just a little bit of background, the juvenile justice system was established in the early 1900s. In the 80s and 90s, similar to other aspects of our criminal justice system, we started to see kids given more harsher, more punitive punishments. And now you hear a lot more bipartisan talk around restorative justice focused initiatives and things that are a little bit more balanced. One moment. All right. So now I'm going to get a little bit into the research and what some of the literature shows around youth that are justice involved in their health. Dr. Liz Barnard is one of the leading pediatrician scholars from UCLA and does a lot of work around youth that are justice involved. And so this conceptual model is from one of her papers in 2015. She did a qualitative study of youth themselves who were justice involved to get a sense from them of why they think that justice involvement happened in the first place, what kind of things put them at risk. And I think this is really interesting and really kind of captures at least some of my thoughts about it as well. So the kids thought in her analysis that children spend the vast majority of their time at home and at school, and that those are really protective environments, and that things that keep kids in home and keep kids in school are preventative measures for getting involved in the juvenile justice system, but things that push kids out of the home or out of school put them at risk of being kind of more involved, like out in the neighborhood, just like not in these more structured settings, and that depending on the dynamics of that neighborhood, put them at risk for justice involvement. So for some of the trainees in the room, can you guys give me some examples of things that might have a kid spending less time at home and or less time at school? What kind of things? Domestic violence, Christian? Sure, yeah, chronic illnesses that are poorly controlled. Say that one more time. Homelessness, yep. Parental incarceration. School suspension. Hunger. And so the kind of common thread in what you guys are saying that I'm hearing are ACEs, right? So adverse childhood experiences. And so this was some data from 2014, so a little bit dated, but still very relevant, where youth that are justice involved were assessed for the adverse childhood experiences that they've had. And so you can see that the numbers are astronomical. Family violence, parental separation or divorce, and household member incarceration were the most common ACEs that kids that are justice involved experience. And we know that a higher ACE score puts kids at risk from a health perspective. One thing that I thought was really interesting was that the almost in all, looks like in all categories, the girls' ACEs were higher than the boys, and in this study that was statistically significant. So when we think about the health impact, if we haven't convinced you that this is a public health issue, we're going to really dive into that now. From a general health standpoint, youth that are justice involved have a higher usage of emergency department and hospital resources. So these are kids that are less likely to have a medical home and have a lower use of well-child visits. Up to 76% reported general medical issue, and these mirror what we see in clinics, so the common chronic diseases. 6% upon intake had an acute dental issue, so a dental abscess or tooth fracture, and 20% had a traumatic injury. From a sexual health perspective, youth in the justice system have some of the highest rates of STIs, and Dr. Ballard's going to give you a glimpse into that from the DC lens. And I thought this was interesting. 20% of these kids are either expecting a child or are already a parent. From a mental health standpoint, so Dr. Everett gave us lots of things she was thinking about from a mental health perspective. There are disproportionately higher mental health diagnoses among incarcerated youth, including ADHD, depression, anxiety, and substance use. The studies kind of vary, but basically the take-home point is that up to 50% of these kids at least have one psychiatric diagnosis. And some more data from you, or for you rather. This is an article from Pediatrics from 2016, where this group looked at 14,000 kids, 14,000 adults assessed if they had a history of incarceration either as an adolescent or as a young adult. 14% of them did. And so then they kind of divvied those up based on the duration of incarceration, and their hypothesis was that there would be a dose-response relationship between time spent behind bars and negative health outcomes. So you can see half of these folks only spent under a month behind bars. The outcomes that they examined were general health, functional limitations and disabilities, depressive symptoms, and suicidal thoughts. And their findings were really astounding and found that incarceration during this time period, even for very short time frames, translated to worse physical and mental health outcomes, even when controlling for their baseline health and other social determinants. So now I'm going to transition and let Dr. Ballard share a little bit with you about what he does. We met when I was a resident and spent some time with him on a rotation at DYRS. And as a fellow, we've continued our relationship. We do some QI work around asthma at DYRS together. With no further ado.
So now that you've heard all that good news about the juvenile justice system, I'll pick up where Alex left off. In 2013, I was minding my own business, happy as the medical director of two of our outpatient health centers in Southeast. And I received a call from a recruiter asking me if I'd be interested in serving as the medical director for the DC Department of Youth Rehab Services. She told me that the facilities were being sued in a 30-year-old consent decree for unconstitutional health care delivery, unconstitutional mental health services, just an array of problems. And I said, okay, great, I'll sign up for that. But it wasn't my plan. I had no experience working in juvenile detention facilities whatsoever. But I've always kept an open mind, and those people who know me know that I'm not afraid of a challenge. And so when this opportunity came to me, as I always do, I sort of prayed about it and just thought that, hey, if this is the right thing for me, that it happens. So I went on a few interviews and visited the facilities, and before I knew it, I was taking this position. And so I want to share with you a little bit of what I've learned over the past 5 years, and hope that it'll spark your interest in this topic. So, as Alex mentioned, efforts at incarcerating kids have failed miserably over the past century. The first legislation that was aimed at fixing this problem was the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974. It was really aimed at keeping kids out of adult detention facilities, jails, and prisons. And for those who are placed in jails and prisons, to keeping them separate from the adults. It stopped locking up kids for status offenses, such as running away. And the big aim was to try to lower the rate of juvenile detention for minorities who are disproportionately affected by incarceration. And you saw Alex's slide. This wasn't lost on me because the first day I walked into our detention facilities, I noticed that every kid looked like me. And this has been the case everywhere throughout the country that I've visited. All the facilities that I've gone to, it's black and brown kids who are locked up. D.C. has undergone significant changes in its overall demographic composition. However, all the kids in our juvenile facilities are black. So it's pretty sad. This slide sort of illustrates how complicated the juvenile justice system is. And for those of you who see kids in the emergency room who come in with the police, I just want to let you know that those aren't our kids. D.C. really tries to divert kids from the juvenile justice system. So if a kid is arrested, every attempt is made to try to enroll that kid in a community-based initiative so that they do not progress throughout the juvenile justice system. I often get calls from the emergency room here about a kid who shows up with the cops who was arrested and they're trying to determine where to send that kid. And I have to tell them that we can't pick up a kid. The kid has to go to court and be found guilty before we can pick them up. So all the kids in our system have been sentenced or adjudicated. Some facts about juvenile detention. About 40% of the kids, as Alex mentioned, are being detained for status offenses. And these are offenses that otherwise would not be considered criminal if they were over the age of 18, like truancy, like running away. A lot of them are in our custody for low-level property offenses, which is probation violations. On any given day, about 54,000 offenders are in detention or residential treatment facilities, and about 200 youth are tried, sentenced, and incarcerated as adults every year in the United States. And it's really subjective about who gets tried as an adult. It all depends on the judge. There's no formula that you can always try because many kids who are in our system have been to D.C. jail as well. A little bit about our agency. There are about 200 kids in D.C. that are committed to DYRS. And this is down because when I started in 2013, there were about 500. 20% are female. 65% of the kids in our custody are in what we consider non-secure places. And I'm going to have a drink of water because I've been talking in court all day, so I'm not going to excuse me. And that's really the aim of our agency, is to provide these kids with all the services they need in the most home-like environment. We want to try to reach them in group homes, at their actual home if possible, or in a foster home. The rest of our kids are in secure confinement, and most of these kids are in our secure detention centers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. When we talk about efforts to decrease the number of kids who are locked up, one of the most significant pieces of legislation passed in D.C. in 2016, and that was the Comprehensive Youth Justice Amendment Act. Here is pretty much what it did, but the most significant piece to this legislation was that it transferred all the kids, all the juveniles who were at the adult detention facilities. Basically, all 30 kids who were at D.C. jail were transferred to our custody. A little bit about our facility. We have 4 main facilities. 2 of these are really aimed at providing services for kids in non-secure environments. We have an achievement center located in Chinatown, which is responsible for giving services to kids in wards 1 through 6. And we have the MLK Achievement Center, which is located near our Children's Health Center of Anacostia. And this is responsible for services for kids in wards 7 and 8. And families can come into these centers anytime they want and receive educational services, tutoring, job placement services, really a continuum of services designed to keep kids out of trouble. Our secure detention facilities, which is where I spend most of my time, and which is what I'll spend the rest of my time talking about, are the New Beginnings Youth Development Center. This is a 60-bed facility in Laurel, Maryland, where kids who are pretty much adjudicated detained are in our custody. And the average length of stay for these kids is anywhere from 8 months to 2 years. While they're with us at New Beginnings, they go to school. There's a chartered school right there on the campus. They receive job training, medical and dental and behavioral health services, and basically structured recreation to try to rehabilitate them and prepare them for reentry. Our short-term detention center is the Youth Services Center, which is located about a mile from here. And the kids who are there are usually there for about 2 days to 2 weeks. And these kids are pretty much being detained until they go back to court to be sentenced. And while they're with us, they have to go to school. BCTS has a campus right there at our facility. They receive group therapy, medical, behavioral health services, everything that they need to help them to get back on the right path. So when we talk about healthcare systems in these juvenile justice facilities, there's a lot of variation across the country. I've had the opportunity to visit several facilities as I try to get better at doing this job because providing services to kids in detention is a lot different from doing it in the community. They can't just come down. Every kid has to be escorted by security officers. And so there are a lot of challenges to getting the right kids, the right care at the right time. A couple of years ago, I actually spent a summer at a prison in Arizona. That probably was overkill, but I learned a lot about just what some of the challenges are in healthcare delivery in these systems. Many places are under federal mandates, like I said, including D.C., and this is in 2013 for unconstitutional healthcare. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There are national standards that exist, and the National Commission for Correctional Healthcare is a branch of the American Medical Association. They wrote the standards for what services should be available for inmates, juveniles in detention, etc. But many facilities aren't required to undergo voluntary accreditation. Most of these facilities were not built with health services in mind. When you go to them, most of the health centers are a former cell that's been sort of turned into sort of health clinic. These facilities were built with safety and security in mind, so they just want to make sure that no one escapes. The health services is always an afterthought. And generally speaking, most of these places just have been insufficient to meet the changing needs of teenagers and adolescents. And so all the problems that come with that exist. This is what we see in our kids. As Dr. Alex mentioned, about 30% of our kids who come into our facilities have an STI that's untreated. We have a high rate of pregnancy. Someone mentioned chronic disease being a risk factor for incarceration. About half of our kids have some chronic illness that has to be treated while they're with us. We got a lot of kids with partially treated injuries. They were shot and never followed up, and so we have to take care of their wounds while they're with us. I'd probably say about 10% of our kids are actually up to date on their vaccines by the time they come to us. So we have a lot of vaccine delays. And of course, mental illness and substance abuse. That's probably the biggest thing that we see in our population. So what was it like when I got there in 2013? In short, a mess. It was bad. It was much worse than I could possibly have imagined. I'm serious. I mean, it was hard to believe that this type of care was being delivered in the nation's capital in 2013. Part of the problem was the lack of accountability. The previous people who held my position were there part-time. They were usually appointed to the position. And so it was a second job for most of them, and that was evident by what I found when I got there. There were no policies or procedures that governed health services. There were not about 60% of the staff was contract nurses and nurse practitioners who meant well, but this wasn't their main job. They worked here 2 days a week or maybe just on nights every other weekend. And so they sort of just came and went. So if something didn't get done, it was just left undone. When I opened the refrigerator, there were clotted blood specimens. There were urine samples that had been there for weeks because there was no really organized way of picking up labs. There were no vaccines in a place where you have adolescents for months at a time. No one was getting vaccinated, not even a flu shot during flu season. Broken equipment. There was a blood pressure monitor that just didn't work. It was just sitting there, and I'm like, what is that for? And it just didn't work at all. And so it was really bad, and we had a lot of work to do to try to get it right. The mental health staff that we had were rotating in and out every 3 or 4 months because they were just so overwhelmed. So there was no one who was there who was really experienced at taking care of kids. So their services were pretty much limited to crisis services when there was something really bad happening. And so the question comes to mind, well, why was this a job for a pediatrician? Why not a psychiatrist or, someone else or someone who has an expertise in dealing with kids with who are juvenile involved, who are justice involved? The fact of the matter is that as pediatricians, we see these kids. We see these kids in our offices. We see them in the emergency room. We see them in our continuity clinics, everywhere. That's what Sims mentioned. The other thing is that we're trained to take care of a kid in its entirety. We take care of the social, the emotional, the physical health, the mental health. With the help of a consulting psychiatrist, we can oversee systems of medication. We may not prescribe antipsychotics, but we know how these are supposed to be prescribed. We know that the kid shouldn't be on 2 of them. We know that the kid shouldn't be on 3 stimulants, and we know what safe dosing ranges, generally speaking, are. And we also know how to monitor properly for side effects. There were several kids who were on multiple antipsychotics and hadn't had as much of a CBC done in months. The focus of our training is on wellness and prevention. And when you have a captive audience that's going to be with you for several months, you can do a lot of great things as far as teaching them how to take better care of themselves, teaching them about sexual health and STI prevention. The other piece to it is that we understand the importance of community involvement. We know that it's not just our job to take care of this kid. We know that, and we understand that once this kid leaves our facility, they need a safe medical home to be able to go to. And so linking these kids to safe medical homes is a big, big part of what we do. And that's a natural thing for pediatricians. As good as we are and as all the improvements that we've made in our detention facilities, I never want our facilities to be considered anyone's medical home. And so where we are today, we've done a lot of great things over the last 5 years, and most of this has been done not because we're excellent or we're just smart people, but because we care. We really, really care about these kids. We care what happens to them when they leave our facility. It's not easy work, so I'm not going to tell you I just pop into work every day smiling and laughing and happy because, some of these kids can be really, really mean. But, at the end of the day, they're kids. It sounds like, a juvenile detention facility, you have all these little murderers running around with knives. But, these are kids, who cry because they miss their parents, or they want to go home, and as bad as they are, they come back and they'll apologize to you for something that they said or they did. And you really feel that what you're doing is important. You feel the impact of the work that you do every day. I don't know if Dr. Tyler has made it in here yet, because if you think one pediatrician is good, imagine having 2. And I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Chandra Tyler-Bynum, who worked with us for a couple of years and really helped us to launch our comprehensive electronic health record. When you have dentists, mental health specialists, and physicians all charting in the same chart, you can imagine how much of a mess that was. But we were able to put that together, and we have a really good electronic health record now. As Dr. Sims, I don't know if you mentioned this, but we achieved our accreditation by the National Commission for Correctional Health Care in 2017. We have full-time staff members who own this process, who care about these kids. who come to work every day, who know that if a lab is ordered and it's not done, that it's a huge deal because I'm going to go crazy. And so we have master's level mental health specialists who are in our facility for 14 hours every day to make sure that they provide group therapy, individual counseling for our kids. Substance abuse coordinator who's with us as well, and we have 12-step meetings to address substance use in our kids. We have a full-time dentist. That's better than community. You know, if we have a kid who has a dental issue, we can just refer right to our dentist who's there every day. And of course, we have a registered dietitian now to make sure that our kids are eating healthy and nutritious meals. I was in court today, guys, so I actually go to court sometimes too. Whenever our kids go up for our adjudication hearings, for their adjudication hearings, we can go and let the judge know how they're doing in our system and how they behaved and everything like that. And sometimes they get to go home early. So, excuse me, I'm talked out today. So here are some examples of how we're working with children. I train here at Children's. So this is my home. Some of my best friends are here today. I'm so happy to see you. I see you now. Kara, Terry, all my folks are here. And this is my second family right here. And so I love these people. Dr. Sims, as she mentioned, works with us to do quality improvement work to improve asthma care to our residents. And so our next project is going to be hypertension. So get ready for that. Dr. Zavari from the emergency room, they come quarterly to help us improve our emergency response. It's a challenge trying to respond to an emergency in the correctional facility when every door is locked and you have to sort of coordinate when the first responders arrive. And so they come quarterly to help us run emergency drills using a high-fidelity management. Dr. Hope Rhodes and her team, she has a reproductive health grant. And they come and they do groups for our kids to teach them about contraception, about sexual health, just a really, really great program that the kids enjoy. Several of the faculty members from Children's have come to our facility to do in-services for our staff, and so that's been a really good partnership. And the cardiology team over here reads our EKGs for us, for our kids who are on high-dose stimulants, or for the kids who like to have heart attacks all the time. So we have a lot of drama queens and kings, as you can imagine. In spite of all that we're doing, there still are some issues that are not only confronting our system, but confront juvenile systems throughout the country. The juvenile justice system has sort of become the de facto place to send all kids with chronic untreated mental illness. Years ago, they stopped hospitalizing kids and closed a lot of the public hospitals where kids used to access services. And so it's oftentimes that we get kids in our system who haven't really committed a serious crime, but their parents have called the cops on them a lot because they're fighting at home and it's not doing well. And these kids end up in our system, and they don't do well in our system. But the judges continue to send them back. And we struggle with trying to find placements for these kids. There are limited options for inpatient psychiatric treatments for our kids. There just are. One of the most frustrating days for me was one night when I was on call. I was called in to come to the facility because we had a kid who was having a psychotic break. Called almost every hospital in D.C., and they would not take this kid. And I think that's a shame that in 2018 that, we can't find services in the District of Columbia sometimes for our kids who need an inpatient psychiatric treatment center. Some of these have a history of aggression, and hospitals just aren't willing to take those. And so what we do is the best that we can for these kids. And so those of you who are interested in advocacy, definitely come talk to me about some of the ways that we can overcome this obstacle. All right.
Okay, everyone, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Dr. Sims and Dr. Ballard. They are just fantastic colleagues, and I consider both of them mentors. So I just wanted to close out the evening in this last part of the presentation to share with you all the role of advocacy in resident education here at Children's National and the opportunities that you will have as a resident here at Children's National to engage in advocacy. First, I want to highlight that at Children's National, we have a four-part mission. It's the CARE mission of care, advocacy, research, and education. So you can see that advocacy is deliberately woven into our mission here, and it is a big part of what we do every day. And this part of the mission, the advocacy mission, is led by our Child Health Advocacy Institute. And I know we have some CHI team members here tonight, so I would like to ask them to stand so they can wave to the group. I see two of my team members here, Dr. Chaya Merrill and Ayana Clarence. Great. And we work through leadership and collaboration to advance policy and systems changes to achieve health equity for all children. The CHI was actually the first hospital-based advocacy institute in the nation, and you met earlier at the beginning our leader, Tanya Vidal-Kinlow. And the Child Health Advocacy Institute is composed of 4 departments, and we're data-driven in our approach. We start with our Child Health Data Lab led by Dr. Chaya Merrill, and then we have our Community Affairs and Municipal and Regional Affairs departments, which are actively engaged in multiple programs and policy initiatives in the community, and we have our government affairs team that works on crafting the policy and legislative solutions to some of the challenges that you've heard about tonight. And so in the Child Health Advocacy Institute and at Children's National, we recognize that we have to move beyond the walls of the hospitals and the health centers to impact juvenile justice in our communities. And we've taken both a programmatic and a policy approach here. In 2011, the American Academy of Pediatrics released a policy statement about health care for youth in the juvenile justice system. And it said that pediatricians should be advocating for programs in their community that train individuals who are interacting with youth on a regular basis. And so the CHI, collaborating with many of our colleagues across Children's National, has instituted trauma-informed care trainings in our community. And since 2016, we've trained over 400 individuals. You'll see here, that's our leader, Tanya Vidal-Kinlow. We did a training for the Metropolitan Police Department and all of the school resource officers. So people who are in really frequent contact with kids in our community. And we train them on trauma-informed approaches and how to de-escalate youth behavior. We've also trained all of the judges in the Prince George's County Circuit Court, which really goes back to an important point that Al mentioned. When kids are justice involved, they are not tried by jury. Their fate rests in the hands of judges. So getting to the judges and training them on some trauma-informed approaches and better understanding of adolescent behavior is one way we can help to intervene in the juvenile justice system. And then on a policy level, there is a lot of evidence that problems in school lead to juvenile justice involvement. When they did a survey in 2016 of youth in residential custody, over 60% had been expelled or suspended from school the year prior to justice involvement. So in the CHI, we've really thought about, well, what are the policy changes that need to happen or that we can support to make our school climates and our school settings better for children? So we've worked both on these are 3 pieces of legislation from the federal level in Virginia and in Washington, D.C. that seek to implement trauma-informed care programs in these settings and, importantly, limit suspensions and exclusions in school. And so now I wanted to talk briefly about some of the educational opportunities that you would have here if you come here for residency to engage in advocacy. It is really woven into our curriculum from the beginning of intern year, and everyone who trains in this program gets training in advocacy. And I want to also emphasize that a number of these aspects of our curriculum are actually led by our residents. So you don't just participate, you get an opportunity to lead. And many of the faculty and residents who lead these initiatives are here tonight. I see Dr. Kara Lichtenstein, who leads our former community health track, now leadership and advocacy for the underserved in community health. So I hope you will get a chance to speak with them during our reception tonight. And just as a brief example, every intern participates in Intern Advocacy Day, where you spend a day at the Capital Area Food Bank and you learn about food insecurity in our community. You do a communal cooking class, and you do a hands-on poverty simulation. So you really get connected to our community from the minute you arrive here. And then we have very hands-on advocacy opportunities, again, many of which are led by our residents. So every April, our residents go up to Capitol Hill and meet with members of Congress about a pressing child health issue. The Child Health Advocacy Institute also hosts trainings, Grab a Plate and Advocate. We did one a couple of weeks ago on the public charge ruling from the Department of Homeland Security, and multiple people from our institution submitted comments online to the Federal Register about the public charge issue. We also, this is one of our residents, Morgan Greenfield, who gave testimony before the DC Council. So if you are here, you will be an advocate. You will get that as part of your training. And also, our residents are leaders in the DC chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our resident representatives are David Little, Sarah Duran, and Catherine Posada. So if they're here tonight, I hope you'll get a chance to connect with them. And I'd also add that to the leaders of the DC chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Ankur Shah and Dr. Lenore Jarvis, are children's faculty. So we are active, we are engaged, and if you come here, you'll see that advocacy is really woven into the fabric of your training, that we offer a lot of opportunities to support your interests, and we have this unique location in Washington, D.C. that you can take advantage of. And most importantly, that at Children's National, we're committed to advocating for all youth. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ballard to just close out our presentation with some final thoughts. But thank you, and I look forward to speaking to you more at the reception.
Before I close, I did want to just recognize my friend and colleague who just came in here, Dr. Condra Tyler, who was my assistant medical director at DYRS for 2 years, and it's phenomenal. She's trained here as well, and she'll be hanging around to talk to some of you about some opportunities as well, so thank you. This year's American Academy of Pediatrics Conference, our keynote speaker was a gentleman by the name of Adam Foss, who is a former assistant district attorney from Boston, and he's a fierce advocate for reform of mass incarceration. And this is a quote from his speech. He knows that a black youth who is expelled from school between the ages of 8 to 12 years has a 50% increased likelihood of dropping out of school. 75% of people in prison are high school dropouts, he said. And this was his challenge to all of the pediatricians in the audience. Each one of you has the opportunity to stick your arm into that pipeline and pull one kid out. Exercise your sword and your shield, because when you do, amazing things happen. I take this to work with me every day, because you never know how much your actions are affecting the group of kids that you're seeing. And sometimes it can feel like you're overwhelmed by trying to save the entire system. If you focus on one kid at a time, making a difference in their lives, and amazing things can truly happen. Thank you for your interest in this topic, and hope to talk to you a lot after this, after the reception. So, thank you.